Welcome to the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast, episode 6. My name is Yuri, and I'm joined by Keishi.
Hi Yuri, how are you today?
I'm good, Keishi. I have my water and my black tea. I'm ready to go to work.
I have my green tea, so let's get started.
This podcast is brought to you by green tea, water, coffee, and more importantly, it's the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast. So if you want to check the notes for everything that we're going to talk about today, go to sidehustlesandstuff.com/E6 for the notes. And by the way, we're now up on Apple Podcasts. So be sure to leave a review, rate it, and let us know your feedback. Moving onwards. So Keishi, today we're talking about the 5 types of blogs you can start today.
Yeah, exactly. And before we jump into that, actually, we should probably start by looking at what blogs actually are, because I think they span a much wider variety of websites than many people think, right?
Yeah, that's true. Because I think if you ask an ordinary person what they think of a blog, the first thing that comes to mind is like, it's like almost like an online diary, like Zanga.com or LiveJournal, where people just write about their day.
Yeah, I think that's right. Or people just imagine somebody sitting on a beach making a couple $1 million a year out of their blog without even knowing what their blog actually is. So I think just to sort of make this clear, when we're talking about blogs, there's anything that ranges all the way from like the diary tab that you were talking about, all the way to like $1 million businesses and everything in between, whether it's sites making a couple $100, couple $1,000, or $10,000-$20,000, whether it's sites talking about dogs or about your personal life or about aircraft or about whatever topic there is under the sun.
Yeah, blogs definitely span a wide variety of topics and usage, whether from personal and up to just professional bloggers and companies and corporations that have their own blogs. So first, let's jump into the upsides. What are the benefits or the advantages of blogging?
So let's start with the first one. And the level to which you will be able to do this really depends on the model you choose. And we'll be talking later about the different models, the different types of blogs that you can run. But I think the first one is just it gives you a platform to express yourself, to have a voice, whether it's teaching somebody on some topic or just sharing your random thoughts.
Agreed. I definitely had and still do. I still have personal blogs where I think of something stupid to write about. Like I told you last time, why men should watch rom-coms. Where I think I also wrote up one on Terrace House. What about you?
Yeah, same here. So I don't write about rom-coms, but
I
have a personal blog. Maybe I should, yeah. I have a personal blog at keishinukina.com where I just share my thoughts on whether it's online business or kind of life in general. And I rarely post there, but when I post there, it's me actually writing it and just sharing my thoughts. And it's kind of a platform where I can just go out and write something that's on my mind.
Yeah, and I think that's a very big benefit, just to have your own channel for expression where you're not stifled by business reasons, and you can stick to whatever you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's good to have some place where you can just dump your mind.
Yeah. And I think the second advantage here is that if you're good at dumping your mind and people like it, they will follow you for your unique perspective. Or at the same time, if they don't quite yet, it offers you a channel to develop a voice or develop a writing style that people may like ultimately. So kind of 2 benefits in one. Either you develop a voice, people like what you write, they will follow you for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think there are so many people that just started by kind of using a blog as their diary, except the difference between a regular diary and a blog is that a blog can be found out there by other people.
That's true. You don't want your diary to be found.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you start a blog, keep in mind that people can find what you write. But yeah, there's many people that started their blog sort of as a diary, and then as kind of a side benefit, they grew an audience and eventually went on to build a thing into an actual business, an actual asset.
Yeah, I know. I've also followed blogs where I just thought the person's writing was funny. So, if you're thinking, wait, do people actually do that? Well, people do actually do that, even though they might not be as common.
Yeah, and I think over the years, kind of the meaning of blogging and kind of the reason why people blog and things like that have really evolved. And I think there's been a shift from kind of just blogging for the sake of blogging and blogging for kind of just expressing yourself. Although I'm not saying it doesn't exist anymore, but I think many more people are much more intentional, I guess, about it these days. And I think like you noted here that by blogging, you can develop an asset. So Yeah. So what does that mean that we can develop an asset by blogging?
Yeah, that's a good question. The benefit of blogging is you get to develop an asset. And by asset, let's say you stick with it, right? Let's say you have now 100 posts or 100 pieces of writing. If you're writing about a certain topic outside of your life, essentially what you now have is a collection of work. You can take those 100 blog posts, you can turn that into a book. So you have an asset, you have assets. Like in the work sense of the word asset, it could be anything from like art files, right? PDFs, spreadsheets that you have that kind of like, they're pieces of the puzzle that you can put together.
Yeah.
And that can apply to, blogging. Every single piece of writing that you pull out is essentially now you have a collection of work that you can use to apply elsewhere. At the same time, the blog can be a monetary asset if you're earning money from it. So you're kind of building up an asset. Or if people like your voice, you may be developing your brand now if people are following you. So the blog is in a way is kind of an asset.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with this. And I think for everybody, it will be a different type of asset, or not for everybody, but there's a couple different ways this can be looked at. And like you said, one is just you have something that you created that you can go around and show to people. And I think it's a much better resume, a much better CV
Yes.
than whatever you could put together in Word and compress into one page, because it actually shows people that you can do work, that you can kind of do things consistently and produce quality outputs. And I think that helps you both in terms of it being just a portfolio, as well as in terms of helping you kind of brand yourself, like I said. And then I think there's the reason why a lot of people go into blogging nowadays, which is you can build a monetary asset that just keeps paying you dividends, essentially.
Yeah.
So do you think there are any other upsides of blogging? Or?
Yeah. Well, I guess the fourth upside is it kind of deserves its own mention. You earn income, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Fifth is it's easy to do on the side. Like Keishi, how about an example of how exactly is blogging easy to do on the side?
Well, I think the easiest example to look at is like, let's say you want to start a business while you actually hold a day job. Like imagine you wanted to start a bakery, right? You can just open a bakery and do bakery like every Monday, or do bakery every other day, or do bakery for 1 hour every evening, because you have rent, you have overhead, you have to pay staff, and you just got to pay attention to it all along, right? Whereas with the blog,
Yeah.
I think you can kind of mold the work to fit whatever your schedule is like, rather than the other way around. So if you only have 5 hours on
Yeah.
Saturday every week, that's great. That's like probably enough to write 2 blog posts a week. Or if you only have 1 hour every evening, that's 7 hours a week. So that's like 3 blog posts a week. And if you skip 1 week, then nobody's going to get angry at you. There's going to be no angry customers waiting for your donuts.
We want the blog
Exactly.
post. We want the blog
And
post.
probably once you're at the point where there's angry customers waiting for a blog post, then you probably are able to take this full time and turn it into big business. So I think that's one of the greatest things about blogging is it can be done sort of gradually.
Yeah, there's no pressure and you have the creative freedom to do whatever. And I guess the next benefit is it's easy for anyone who's already used to writing or enjoys writing. I know some sickos out there, including us, don't mind writing too much.
Recently, I've been realizing I probably don't like writing as much as I thought, but yeah, absolutely. I think both of us have written dozens and dozens of articles by ourselves, and if you enjoy writing, you're probably like 1/4 of the way there.
I wouldn't say enjoy. There's also you tolerate it. You can sit down and get it done, whereas most people can't.
Yeah, I think tolerate's better, because there's, depending on how you decide to build your blog, I'd say there's going to be a lot of writing that you don't necessarily enjoy.
Yeah. Or there's writing that you put out that you don't like yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So we quickly covered the upsides of blogging or the advantages. So now let's jump into the downsides or disadvantages of blogging. And I think the one obvious one is that a lot of people hate writing. Like we just talked about, you kind of tolerate writing. There's very, very few people out there that actually love writing that much. And in my conversations, Keishi, like when I talk to friends, when I say, why don't you start a blog? The first thing that comes to mind is like, I don't know what to write about. What will I write about? Or they're just like, I hate writing. I can't sit down and do it.
Yeah, I think that's a very common problem. And there's probably way more people in the world that don't like writing compared to people that like writing. But that said, I think there's still probably successful bloggers that don't necessarily like to write, right? Because I think blogging's not just about writing, is it?
No, like there's the writing part and there's the writing is like the micro view of things, whereas the blogging part and the overall view is like the macro. It's like, so the writing is the little pieces of assets that you're collecting and putting together. Then your blog, the overall entity. You know how we were talking about last time, you said you're much more interested in the process of publishing and putting out more so than you are about the actual writing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was kind of hinting at is, well, I guess there's two ways. And one is you either have some money to kind of invest upfront and you just experiment with hiring writers and things like that. Or in the beginning, you just kind of deal with it and tolerate it and just go through it, just push through it and get the articles written by yourself and see if you can start making some money that way and then just reinvest that money and start outsourcing the part which you don't like. So, yeah, so I don't necessarily think you have to enjoy writing per se, but at the same time, you probably have to, in one way or another, enjoy content in its written form because you're still going to be editing articles and you're still going to be kind of planning out the topics and figuring out what to put out there and things like that.
Yeah. So on the next list of downsides is many people, I think, this is just my opinion, but I don't think many people are big readers. I have friends that completely avoid books. So if they can't read a book, they're definitely, people aren't exactly hungry for blogs as they are, for example, for video or audio.
Yeah, I guess you could say so, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of people don't like sushi, but there's still sushi chains that make a lot of money. So I think there's probably enough demand, I guess you could say, for almost any topic out there. But personally, I think the bigger challenge here is that YouTube's becoming much more popular, and there's a lot of topics that are better suited for video than for text would be my bigger concern, probably.
I've heard people say that they'd rather read than listen to an audiobook because you can read faster than wait for someone to explain something over audio, which kind of also applies to video.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think it really depends on the topic. If it's something like how to change a tire on your car, then it's probably better to watch it in video. Versus if it's something like benefits of earning money or something that doesn't necessarily have to be very visual, then probably reading or text is a good medium to convey that information in. So yeah, I think while people aren't big readers, people still like to solve their problems. So I think if you help them do that for your blogs, then you still have better than good enough chances. Do you think there's any other downsides to this?
I guess finally it just work, and it can be more difficult than it seems. Because again, we talked about this extensively. Blogging is like it's hard work. It's hard work over a long period of time if you want to get some results out of it.
Yeah, I think so. It's again, it also depends on what you want. But in the context that we're talking about, I think we're generally trying to talk about making money for blogging, right?
Yeah.
And in that case, I think it just got to be taken as a serious job, even though there's the flexibility side where you don't have to do it necessarily 5 or 7 days a week for 8 hours a day, but you still have to do it consistently over a long period of time to make it successful.
Exactly. All right. So we just covered the upsides and downsides of blogging. Now let's move on to the next point. And before we jump into the types of blogs, like content-wise, there are also types of blogs based on hosting. For example, there's a .com, there's a free, and there's a social media, right?
Yeah, so you can either host your blog kind of yourself as a self-hosted blog, so you can have a domain that's like either .com or .net, or there's many more of them right now. Or you can kind of use one of the free blogging platforms like WordPress, Blogspot.
Yeah.
Or then, yeah, I guess like you said, you could also call social networks, social media as blogs to some extent.
Yeah, Tumblr, I think, started off as a blogging platform, but nowadays it's not so much. And so I guess the benefits of the last two, the free and the social media, is that they're easy to start. They're free. You can just jump in and start putting out content.
Yeah, I think they're easy to start, like you say, but at the same time, it's really easy to start a self-hosted WordPress blog nowadays, I think. And I think the benefits from hosting the site yourself rather than relying on one of the free platforms are much greater. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I agree, but I agree with this point only on our level. Like for us, this is no big deal, but for someone who's just like, I don't know what a blog is, and they're hesitant to throw down money and buy something they don't understand, they probably wouldn't think the same.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess there's a bit less friction because you don't have to spend money, and also it's probably easier to just sign up and be ready to go rather than having to sign up and click install WordPress and things like that. But at the same time, I think to our listeners, I think if you're considering starting a blog with the idea of monetizing it later in one way or another, or with the idea of growing it later on, I would always, and I mean always, recommend just spending the extra $20-$30 that it might cost and go with the .com domain or .net domain or something.
Yeah, because those definitely get more advantages than the free options. I know that Google doesn't really discriminate against free blogs. You can still show up in the search results, but paid sites do have advantages. Like you can have SEO plugins, you can do like 301 redirection, all kinds of stuff to improve your ranking, which is not really available for free options.
Yeah, and I think also a lot of like ad networks and things like that don't support the free platforms. So really, if you want to monetize and if you want to kind of grow it as a business, then you should probably own your domain.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so now that we've covered 3 types of blogs by hosting, let's move on to the 5 types of blogs by the actual content. So this could be personal, business, niche, authority, or news. And let's jump into the first one, personal blog.
Yeah, so before we jump into it, actually, I just want to note that the lines between a lot of these types that we're going to be talking about going forwards are kind of blurry. And one, they depend on the person you ask, but two, also, it doesn't mean that if you decide to start one type of blog out of the 5 that we'll be talking about, that you have to necessarily stay in that lane for forever, or that you can only stay in that lane and that you can't kind of venture into the other types. So I think they're more like general guidelines rather than kind of a solid classification, right? I would say.
Yeah.
So what's the first one that we have?
First one is the personal blog, where the writer is at the center of the brand. It's essentially you with a .com domain name, and you're writing stuff under your own name.
So it's my diary?
Yeah. Well, it could be a diary. It could be whatever you kind of want to publish out there. I mean, why do people write anyway?
Yeah. So I think actually going back to the advantages and disadvantages that we're talking about, I think this personal blog is essentially the platform where you can express yourself the most out of all the different types we're going to be talking about here.
Yeah, because if you're the writer at the helm, then it's not like you have to obey certain standards unless you're working with an affiliate program. But for the most part, the whole point of having a personal blog is to have a personal outlet or channel to express your ideas.
Yes. So I think the blog's owner or the writer or the person behind the blog essentially has all the creative freedom in the world. And it really is a platform to express one's thoughts, one's feelings, one's ideas. But at the same time, I think there's some disadvantages to it. And I guess one would be that it's quite hard to scale, right?
Can you explain by scale?
Well, I think we all only have 24 hours in a day, and there's only so much time we like to spend writing. And in my case, it's very little. And with other blogs, it's really easy to just go out and, well, it's not easy, but it's easier and it's more possible to go out and hire writers to write the content for you.
Yeah.
And you can kind of take over the role of sort of editor or content manager or whatever you want to call it. But you're essentially on the planning side, and then you have writers that are writing the stuff for you. Whereas with the personal blog, you kind of have to actually stay the writer probably for quite a long time.
It's a very good point, and you wouldn't want to have someone else write under your name for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. I think like one of the examples here would be my aviation blog, and I kind of tried to move it into one of the other types that we talked about later. But essentially, I just realized that it was really hard to find a writer that was a match between what I was willing to pay and what I was expecting in terms of quality.
Yeah.
So I decided to kind of rather scale it down and just remain the sole writer on the site and just kind of keep it more as my personal portfolio rather than as a blog that's meant to grow fast and the revenue out of that's supposed to grow fast and so on.
Yeah. So I definitely understand your argument about scaling, but there is an upside. Blogs that have a face behind them, like a real connection, a real person, they are much more approachable, I guess you could say. They're much more welcoming and much, to that extent, I think they're more likely to scale, at least in terms of appeal, if the writer knows what they're doing. I mean, the kind of work that you put out, yeah, you're limited by the 24 hours in a day and how much you actually want to do it. But between a business blog or a niche site or something that is just the logo and like, the people sign off with every article, thank you for reading website.com team. It's not exactly, there's no personality behind it, and no one's really going to care unless it's your face on there. When your face is on there, people start relating to you, people start caring. And to that extent, I think it also plays into possibility that your content may go viral.
Yeah, so I think in terms of somebody being able to relate to your content and somebody being able to, or somebody being interested in kind of following you and subscribing to you, I think this is by far the most attractive type of blog. So if you kind of want to be a mini online celebrity or something, this is the way to go, definitely, because people relate to people, not to like companies and not to side names, right? So I think they would much rather follow Yuri, the guy behind the blog, rather than whatever the blog itself might be. And I also think in terms of if you're trying to build like a consulting business or just try to do something yourself as a person, then a personal blog can be a great asset in terms of helping you have something to show for your work, having some sort of portfolio. Like having my aviation blog helped me a lot, both in terms of being able to do some really cool aviation experiences, but also way beyond that, like in trying to find some consulting clients and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they see it and they see that it's a quality piece of work, then they're more likely to work with you, regardless of whether it's an aviation blog or whether it's a blog about whatever the topic may be.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it may be hard to scale in terms of the amount of work that you put out, but if the personality behind it is strong enough, then that's the part that you can't really replicate. That's the kind of the secret sauce to success. I mean, it's not easy.
Exactly.
It's not an easy secret sauce to success, but it plays a very strong part in the success.
Yeah, I think personality is the right word. It's like people go there because of you. People don't go there because of the content a lot of the times.
Yeah. And so how do these personal blogs make money? I think the listeners are probably wondering, how do people make money through these blogs?
Yeah, I think across the whole spectrum that we're going to be talking here, there's just a couple of monetization methods that we'll repeat. But I think in terms of personal blogs, I see a lot of people just offering consulting or doing their online courses or selling some sort of own products. And then you also have a lot of people that just push affiliate offers.
Yeah.
So there's really wide spectrum, and ads too. But I think they're a bit rarer on the personal type of blog because people are kind of more worried about having their brand be tarnished by just slapping some random ads on the pages. Do you know any other examples of personal blogs?
I think people would like KN Aviation. It's a good example of a personal blog.
Of course, people should also check out your blog at yourblog.com. But I think also on the much bigger level than we are, there's people like Seth Godin who's been posting a post every day for like the last decade or something, I think. Or like you were mentioning Paul Graham, it's like a VC. Yeah. Or I think one that's kind of worth mentioning here, and it kind of ties into the next one, which is business blogs that we're going to be talking about, is Michael Hyatt, who used to be a CEO at one of the large publishing companies. I forgot which one, but he started a personal blog that was personal, but now it turned kind of into Michael Hyatt and Company, but it's still run under the michaelhyatt.com domain. So he kind of found a way to actually scale the personal blog, which is what I think makes him really interesting.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great example. So essentially he went from personal to, you could say, authority.
Yeah, in a way, I think he became the authority on like productivity and things like that. And in a way, his name turned into a brand that's bigger than himself, I think.
That's definitely one of the rare instances where people, well, I wouldn't say rare, but for the most part, people, they tend to stay at the level that they chose to start at.
Yeah, and I think it's with the personal blog, the most difficult thing is that once you start scaling and kind of try to bring on new writer or something, then whoever your most loyal followers are, there's chances that they will go like, oh, but Yuri, I want to be reading about what you have to say. I don't want to be reading what Sarah has to say or whoever. Right? So I think it's really hard for the person at the center of the personal blog to kind of distance themselves from the actual content production.
Yeah.
And I think Michael Hyatt kind of did that successfully.
All right. So we just covered personal blogs. Now let's move on to business blogs. So Keishi, what would you mean by a business blog?
Yeah, so I think for quite a few years now, there's sort of been a content marketing boom among businesses. And it started with companies just essentially not knowing what they were doing. So just ordering these 400 or 500 word articles that are really painful to read and really not valuable at all. And I think it sort of evolved from that into companies actually producing like solid blogs that are worth following and that post really valuable content. But in essence, it's just a blog attached to a corporate website. So let's say there's some consulting firm and they have a blog where they also write about the topic that they consult about.
Yeah.
And it can kind of help them show their authority and show that they know what they're talking about. And it can be a good marketing tool, essentially.
Yeah, good for lead generation. But on the flip side, more times than not, it's not the most interesting content to read, I think, because they're kind of bound by corporate messaging rules that they have for themselves. And also, I mean, they have the signatures for every blog where it's like, this blog was written by Tommy or Johnny or Sarah or whatever. It kind of lacks personality to that extent. Maybe there are some specific faces, but the fact that there's like a big corporate logo there makes it hard to treat it as personal.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think what you said there about like corporate regulations and things like that, corporate policies, it's probably a very valid point. And it's probably why, at least from kind of my personal experience and from looking around, I think that oftentimes it's the smaller companies that have really good blogs compared to like the GE or Procter & Gamble or like whatever other major like Fortune 500 type of company might be out there. So yeah, I think it can work, but like you said, if it starts being bound by corporate policies, or if it's just being written by the marketing department and every piece of content is just promoting whatever product the company is producing rather than actually providing value to the audience, then I think it can be really boring and not worth following at all.
Yeah, for the most part, they do push their own products, and I guess that's how they monetize it. But I'm not sure how well corporate blogs actually convert or how much traffic they get in the first place. But if I were to think about how they make money, it's probably through their own product.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of them, or actually most of them, probably do it for lead generation. And just because essentially every article that you publish out there is kind of like a door to your website, right? People are searching for something and they get in through that door. And if you have like a corporate website that says this is our services, this is our products, this is what we do, then that's really just like one or two doors in. And in a sense, the main door in is like your brand name, people searching your brand name. But once you kind of start writing about the topics that interest people that might be your customers, then you just build so many more new doors that your customers can enter through and get to know your brand. And again, if the content is good, they also get to know that you are a solid player in the market, that you know what you're talking about.
By the way, do you have any examples of really good corporate blogs? Because I can't think of any just yet. I'm sure there are.
I haven't read a corporate blog other than the one that I'm kind of helping a client build for quite a while. But a couple years back, I was following this blog of a startup, and essentially they were just 100% open about all their numbers and like all the tactics they were trying and things like that. So you got a really awesome view into how the startup was working and things like that. And that I think really helped them attract their customers and grow. But yeah, if I had to give you a corporate blog off the top of my head, then I'd have a trouble with that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have trouble coming up with an example here. So, which means we move on to the next point. And the next point is you can have a niche blog. So a niche is essentially a topic, right? A blog for a specific topic.
Yes. So what do you think? Should it be pronounced niche or niche?
It's niche.
It's niche.
But listeners,
okay.
if you have feedback on how to pronounce niche, leave us a comment somewhere, wherever you're listening to this.
Yeah, from what I hear, it's a pretty controversial topic. So that's why I was asking. But yeah, I think after we talk about this, we'll be talking about authority sites. And I think the lines are kind of blurry. And at some point, it becomes really difficult to distinguish between the two.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, essentially, a niche site is very, very limited in its scope. And that kind of limits its growth potential. And like I think now we're kind of getting into the real like making money through blogging territory, or at least what most people imagine under it.
So you would say that a majority of sites under the niche category are there to make money or designed to make money, right?
I think so. I think that's essentially the purpose why people start these sites 99% of the time.
So I guess the quick takeaway for the listener is that if you are considering starting a blog for the sake of earning money, then the type of blog that you should start is probably a niche blog or a niche site.
Yeah, I think you should start with the niche site, but you should kind of keep in scope or keep in the back of your mind that you want to grow it into an authority site. And we'll be talking more about that in a couple of minutes. But just to go back to a niche site, so just to give you an example, like I don't think if this site exists, but like bestdogfood.com or howtotrainapoodle.com, right? Like I think things like that are really, really limited in their topic and that you could probably cover in like 20, 30, 40, 50 articles. I think those are niche sites, essentially. Yeah, so I think a few years back, these kind of sites that were limited in scope were really popular. But nowadays, I think more people are into the authority site kind of game. But you can still probably make money just being focused on a very, very small niche like dog food, for example. So where do you think would be the boundary between a niche site and authority site, which I think is kind of more broader in its scope?
Yeah, it's kind of hard because both tend to focus on specific topics. But in what sense is an authority site broader than a niche site? Like maybe if a niche site is dog food, then an authority site is pet food. I don't know, or pet health.
Yeah, I think it's really blurry, and I think it will really depend on the person how they define it. But I think kind of for the purpose of what we're talking about now, maybe it's better to talk about how they're monetized or how they get their traffic and kind of split them that way.
Yeah. So niche sites, they earn money from affiliate products, their own products, advertisements, and they get traffic from Google. I think most niche sites are in the game to get traffic from Google, right?
Exactly. And I think that's kind of the main differentiator probably is niche sites just want to kind of own the niche and get traffic from Google for searches that are related to that niche and just monetize it. I think oftentimes through affiliates. That's probably the most popular, and especially Amazon Associates. You'll see sites like bestdogfoodreviews.net or like
best language learning software.
And really the goal is just to get traffic from Google, get the traffic converted and get the money and cash in, and that's it essentially. Whereas I think authority site takes it a step further, right?
Yeah. I think, the other thing with niche sites is that I think we kind of covered on this topic, but more specifically speaking, they are built around search terms. Like you said, the domain name usually contains something for what the user is searching for. They'll probably go and check out on Google, all right, how many searches does dog food get? And they'll build a domain around that, and they'll build articles around that just for the sake of ranking and getting money from that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll kind of slowly move into the authority side, which is the next type of site we're talking about. But essentially, I think in context of the authority side, like what you would kind of consider to be just one area that you cover, I think that area taken out and being by itself is essentially a niche site in my mind, kind of. So you kind of have one seed term, let's say dog food, and you just write everything about dog food, right? You write about what's the best dog food for poodles, what's the best dog food for Labrador retrievers or whatever. And you also write, can dogs eat bananas and things like that. Whereas if you had an authority site, you'd probably be talking about dogs in general, and you'd be talking about the food, about the kennels, and about whatever. Or it would be about pet food in general, and you'd be talking about dog food, hamster food, cat food, whatever. So I think an authority site is like a combination of multiple niche sites almost, you could probably say.
Yeah. I wonder if authority sites are more likely to be corporate owned, whereas niche sites are more likely to be individuals or marketing agencies. Like,
yeah, I think that's really hard to say because, I mean, at the end of the day, I think every larger blog is owned by some company, whether it's a one-person company or like a big corporation.
Yeah.
But I think there's plenty of authority sites that are owned by what's essentially a one-person business.
Yeah. And how do they make money? I think also similar as with niche sites. Affiliates ads their own products, and they also focus on getting traffic from Google as well as from their other sources like social or email.
Yeah, so I think affiliates definitely that's a given. But I think compared to niche sites, I think authority sites are much more likely to be monetized by ads because I think a lot of niche sites are kind of focused around reviews and around just trying to sell a certain kind of product, whereas authority sites really focused on informing the visitor, which also means a lot of time having articles that are not necessarily directly aimed at selling any given product.
Yeah.
And in that case, kind of ads were better because they let you monetize almost any article. So I think that, and also because authority sites are almost like a brand level of the personal blog. So people kind of start liking the blog itself and start coming back because they enjoy the blog rather than because they need any single article out of the blog. So I think authority sites are much more likely to have followers, whether, like you said, it's on social or whether it's email subscribers. And they're also much more likely to have, I think, their own products because they're much more likely to sell them.
Yeah. So when you said that authority sites are more likely to offer information instead of straight direct sales, I couldn't help but think of some examples like WikiHow or eHow.com. And these are just purely informational sites.
Yeah, I think there are authority sites in the kind of how to do things space, right? And you could take like Ramit Sethi's I Will Teach You to Be Rich, where there's, I guess you could argue it's a personal blog, but it's also an authority site on kind of the personal finance space. And I think also both of our sites are kind of in the authority site space, or we're kind of trying to position them as such rather than just being about a very specific narrow topic and just kind of being quote unquote done. I think the scope is much broader, and I believe with your site as well as with mine, we're trying to kind of keep it growing as far as possible.
Yeah, but it's definitely definitely hard to set an exact difference between niche and authority because like you said, the lines are quite blurry between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the lines are blurry and it's kind of hard to decide what to call it. And at the end of the day, it's just a matter of what you decide to call it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter too much. But I think if I had to say one thing here as kind of a tip is I think, at least personally, I like to brand broad and start narrow. So I guess to put it in the context of the different types of sites we're talking about, I like to start a site as a niche site, but have it be ready to become an authority site. And to put that back into the dog food terms, it's like, even if I started like 20 articles about dog food because I want Google to think that I'm good at talking about dog food, I wouldn't call the site bestdogfood.com. I would call it something like puppiesandkittens.com or something, right? So that there's kind of future growth potential and future expansion potential.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The other day I saw a website that was about car maintenance or something, and they started posting articles on how to do arts and crafts essentially. And I think it's because they kind of outgrown their niche, but they weren't necessarily ready to do that because of their brand. And it just looked strange.
So it's like finding an article about how to save money while being on a website about dog food.
Yeah, that or even about just how to feed your fish while being on a website about dog food, right?
Yeah. All right. So what's the next kind of site that we have?
Okay, so I think we're on to the last one, right? And
yeah,
and that's a news site. So I think in many ways a news site will kind of fit into one of the four that we were talking about before, but I kind of wanted to separate it out because it has one very distinctive feature.
And the feature is the hamster wheel. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. And it's not the hamster wheel you would write about on your dog food site. What we're talking what we're talking about here is that I mean just by the nature of it, news are changing every day or maybe every week depending on what you write about. But generally what it means once you start a news website is you kind of have to keep producing new content, which is good, which is what you should be doing with all your blogs. But with like authority site, if you publish a content, it's kind of sort of evergreen, right? So if you publish an article about the best dog food, then that article is relevant for like the next few years probably. until some game-changing dog food brand comes out.
Or someone
Whereas
beats
if
you in the rankings.
Exactly, but the content of the article will still be relevant even then, right? It's not like the core of the topic changes. Whereas with the news side, like if you don't stay on the hamster wheel, if you don't keep pumping out articles about the latest news, then you really fall out of relevance because who really cares about last week's news?
Yeah. So you've tried it, right? You've tried to do aviation news on your aviation blog. So how did that go for you?
Yeah, so even outside of my blog, a lot of the blogs that are about aviation and about miles and points and things like that are essentially news blogs. So we have to publish like 4, 5, 6 articles a day, just talking about the news and talking about the industry, talking about the news in the industry. Yeah, so I kind of tried it with my aviation blog, and I really enjoyed just looking at the news, following the news, and writing about the news. But at the same time, after doing it for a couple months, I just realized that it really is a hamster wheel, and I realized that I like aviation, but I don't necessarily want to depend on having to follow the aviation news every single day and about writing about those just to kind of keep my blogs alive. And then that's when I kind of stopped.
So you've had a hand in it. What happens if you stop running around in hamster wheel, if you stop producing content?
Well, I think imagine a hamster wheel producing electricity, except in this case, the hamster wheel is supposed to be producing traffic, right? So I think over time, your traffic will just go down and down and down, and essentially the blog will kind of bottom out.
Yeah.
So I think there's nothing bad about it, and there's a lot of sites that make money as a news site, and all these aviation blogs are a great example of that. And on like the very large scale, you have like the Huffington Post or whatever. But what all of these sites depend on essentially is just pumping out a lot of content every day, and really just being on the hamster wheel and keeping it spinning and keeping it spinning. Because once you stop it spinning, the site will just start kind of decaying.
Yeah. So in a sense, it's about manpower, and I think that's probably too much for one person that's looking to start a side hustle. So based on what you've said so far, I just can't help but think that unless a person is super passionate about a certain topic and the news around that topic, I don't think this is the best option of all the blog sites that we've listed for it to be the first attempt if they were to start one.
Yeah, I would think so. And I think it also ties back into, I think one of the advantages we mentioned of building a blog is that you kind of build an asset. And I think it's much easier to build an asset if you're building a niche site or authority site, because then the site itself becomes the asset.
Yeah.
Right. But I think in case of a news site, you're either like this 1-person or 2-person or 3-person show that's covering news on a certain topic every day, in which case you are the asset. Or if you want an actual asset that you can later on sell, then you got to take it to like much higher level and like have systems in place and probably teams in place and be like, you don't necessarily have to be the Huffington Post, but you have to be at some sort of scale in terms of the production capability and revenues for it to be kind of considered a sellable business or an asset.
Yeah.
Whereas with a niche site or an authority site, even if the site is making like $50 a month, you can probably sell it for like the typical like 25 or 30x the monthly revenues.
Speaking of revenue, how do news sites earn? How did your site earn money?
I think most news sites depend on ads. Some also go into affiliates, and there's some that charge for subscriptions or Patreon and things like that. But I really think it's mostly ads. And in case of aviation, it's a lot of, not in my case, but all the big blogs, they make a lot of money from referring credit card subscriptions essentially as affiliates.
Yeah. All right. So we've covered a personal, business, niche, authority, and news. So it's 5 types of blogs that you could start. And I think the easiest ones to start are personal and niche. If you're looking to start your own side hustle, what do you think, Keishi?
So I think if you're looking to start a side hustle and you kind of want to grow something and have it, I guess, relatively easy and have a chance for kind of growth in the future, I'd say start a niche site, but treat it like an authority site. So like I said before, start really focused, but brand broad so that you can kind of expand in the future. And I wouldn't necessarily base it on yourself because one, if you have a job, then there might be some conflicts in terms of that. But even if you don't have a job, once you attach your name to it, it's really hard to detach your name from it.
Yeah.
So it's probably easier to start with an authority site or with a niche site that's branded around the topic rather than around you.
That's a good point. Plus, whatever content that you put out under your name, like you have to be very careful about the kind of content you put out because again, it's tied to your name and it's tied to your personal image.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just to kind of give an example, I was talking about not being able to hire writers for my aviation site because they kind of didn't meet my what I was expecting. And that's also a reason why the next site and all the subsequent sites that I started, none of them is really dependent on my name or or on me or anything like that. It's essentially just a publication that I happen to be the owner and editor of.
And just to go back on the type of content that you put out, I couldn't help but think of Gary Vee from, say, 10 years back. Back then, he was known as the wine guy because he was doing winelibrary.com. So it goes to show you how the type of content that you put out ends up shaping you and how other people perceive you. Yeah, nowadays he's like the inspirational business guy, hustle guy. But back then, he was all about wine.
Yeah, exactly. I think once you become something guy, then it's really hard to get rid of that name tag and to kind of switch your positioning. So I would just go with like a generally branded kind of niche side, authority side.
Otherwise, you are Keishi, the airplane guy, and I'm Yuri, the language guy. And, I guess the biggest downside is you end up placing yourself under a label. You end up boxing yourself and limiting your ability to spread out into other things.
Yeah, I guess to some point. But also, to be fair, I think it really depends on what you want to do as your side hustle. So, for example, if you want to start a consulting business or like start helping clients with, if you're a copywriter at work, maybe you want to do copywriting for other clients. Or if you're a graphic designer, maybe you want to design websites for other clients. In that case, it might actually be beneficial to have a personal blog, right? So I think it really depends on what your ultimate goal is. But if you're kind of looking for an asset that will be making money for you, that you can build and that will keep making money for you, then I think that niche site or authority site is a good one to go with.
Agreed. So I guess the takeaway is, guys, don't start a new site if you value your time and you want to have plenty of free time in a day. And you don't want to put out so much content or work. Stick to niche or authority for now.
Yeah, and I think the other takeaway is we really like Gary Vee. I think this is like the 6th time in 6 episodes that we mentioned him.
So Gary, if you're listening,
you're welcome as a guest on this show.
Yes. All right, guys. So today you learned about the 5 types of blogs that you can start today. Now, if you do want to start your own blog or side hustle, then we recommend Bluehost. So if you visit sidehustlesandstuff.com/hosting, you can get a great deal on Bluehost, where all you have to do is buy a domain, buy hosting, and there you are with your very own website or blog, whether it's a niche, personal, or authority, and you can go ahead and start putting out your own content, putting out your projects into the world. So be sure to visit sidehustlesandstuff.com/hosting or check the notes for this episode to get the link.
All right. So I think that's it for today. And I think whoever is listening to this should be pretty much ready to get their blog started.
So guys, if you start your own blog, let us know if you somehow found your way to this podcast, whether it's on Facebook or some podcast medium. Leave us a review or a comment. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you started one. Let us know if you want to start one. We want to hear from you. This is the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast with Keishi and Yuri.
Talk to you later.
Bye, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen is a hard word to say.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. I just realized. Basically, right, what happened now was I was talking to a turned off microphone.
Sounds like how to change a tire on your again, you can change a tire on your computer.
Ow, hit myself.
So can you hear my girlfriend hitting the table?
This is the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast with Keishi and Yuri.